Hello and welcome to the Sacral Circle, where we are healing sexual trauma collectively and lovingly. I'm your host, Janie Terrazas, and I'll be interviewing individuals from all walks of life who have had to face a sexual tragedy or abuse in one form or another and triumphed over their adversity. On every episode, a guest will deliver inspirational support, words of comfort, and empowering healing advice. They'll courageously share how their experiences impacted their lives and what led them to face and conquer the blockages that kept them from fully reconnecting to their inner power and divine sacredness. I want to thank our listeners for joining us today on the Sacral Circle, the self-love haven where we leave judgment at the door. And today I am very honored and excited to have the very first male guest on the Sacral Circle. His name is Tompkins. He is a licensed clinical social worker. And instead of just reading a standard bio on his Facebook page, which you can look for if you just go to facebook.com, it's /Tompkins, Tompkins, LCSW. I'm going to read what he had on his Facebook page because I just thought it was so beautiful, and it really does capture what his mission is and what his purpose is and just his overall essence as a human being. In my experience, every individual impacts the world. Beginning in our own personal sphere, our actions radiate out, affecting everything else. Everyone has been created uniquely with a valuable contribution to make and the ability to change the world for better or for worse. If we live authentically, the world benefits from our unique differences. If we allow ourselves to be constrained by the expectations, challenges, and circumstances that we face, the rest of creation loses the potential of our unique gifts. Individuals are suffering because they are not thriving, and the only way to thrive is to live authentically. Our world is suffering because it needs more of us to thrive and contribute our most valuable resource, our uniqueness. I believe that each of us can thrive by discovering and then learning to appreciate, love, and embody the unique, wonderful, and powerful people we are. End quote. Oh, Tom, you need to write a book.
Maybe someday.
I'm telling you, I'm sure it is in your mission. Were you able to hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah, that was beautiful. I didn't realize it sounded so good.
Right? You hear it and you're like, whoa. Thank you so much for your time, because I know you're a very busy man. You have your own practice, and we'll get into what it is that you do, but I'd love to share kind of how we met, actually. I was having the desire to volunteer. God was sort of leaning me in that direction. The divine creator was like, I need you at hospice. So find a place and go volunteer your time when you can. And it was one of the greatest things I could have done for myself. As a matter of fact, I was right in the middle of deep, deep heartache. My husband had decided to walk out of the marriage. We had a business together, so that business was dissolving, and there was just so much going on in my life. And God was really encouraging me to create and to give and to be of service while I was going through all this crap. and I walk into the place where they assigned me to. And it was so funny because, right, Tom, when I walked into the office, I don't know if you felt this, but I met him, and instantly I just knew he was from my tribe. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even we walked in the building. I was outside of the building and we ran into each other. And we found out we had a lot in common in the few minutes that we were talking. And then I realized you were the one that was going to be my point of contact there at the building. And he was so kind. And, anybody who goes into this line of work where they work at hospice, you really do have to have this feeling of like comfort that kind of oozes off of you. And so anybody who serves in this capacity clearly is going to have something like this resonating from them, right? So I felt so comfortable that I actually was able to open up to him about what was going on in my personal life. So he kind of had an idea, and he just like embraced me. And it was like these two spirit beings. We started talking about our outlook on life and what our spiritual beliefs were, and we were in total alignment. It wasn't until later that our friendship started to kind of like even flourish. And just recently I found out that Tom has dealt with sex trauma. So we'll kind of get into that. But I mean, what was your take when you first met me? Did you kind of feel the same thing, Tom?
Oh yeah, I thought you were like a breath of fresh air that walked in the door. Um, I wasn't really sure. I mean, I kind of see the clients that were coming into our facility as being rather traditional. So I wasn't really sure, how well you would be received because you were certainly much bigger than anything I had experienced. And but I said, you know what? This is wonderful. This is great. This is what we need. She's here. I'm just going to let the universe take care of all that. And it was amazing
Mm.
how well received you were. My projections were completely unfounded. I don't think that anybody ever felt uncomfortable when you walked on the door. When people are at the end of their lives and their family members are supporting them, they're in a place that they've never been before. So I don't know that I don't know that the rigid constraints that they've had in the past really have as big of a hold on them as I might expect. So we saw some pretty amazing things take place
Yeah,
with you coming.
oh, thank you so much. Like, yeah, I those have been some of the most memorable moments of my life so far, and it's beautiful when you're able to bring ease to an individual that is feeling a lot of grief or a lot of angst, a lot of stress or whatever that may be for them. And even more beautiful sometimes when you're able to kind of get insight, that intuitive insight, and then are able to deliver information to them that makes sense to them and they needed to hear that exact thing sort of at that moment. So to be able to be used as a vessel, which this is essentially what we are, and you have, for being a male, because all of us have the intuitive divine GPS system kind of wired into us, and some just listen to it and feel it more for whatever reason, right? And you as a man, it's really beautiful because that comes naturally to you. Tell us, like, have you always been in that realm, or was this something that started to happen to you as you started to heal? And we will share, your story about exactly what happened, but I am curious to see if you've always been like this.
Oh no, not at all. I was raised in a very traditional military family. I was really challenged by a lot of barriers. I had difficulty in school, slowest reading group. I had ADHD. They didn't diagnose it back then. I had dyslexia. They didn't diagnose it back then. They just put you in the slowest reading group, and you kind of became labeled as a stupid person at
Yeah.
that point. And so there's a lot of embarrassment and shame. My father was a real go-getter military officer, and it was a struggle. I did, I have always wanted to be spiritual. Back when I was a little boy, it meant being a good Catholic. I was raised in the Catholic Church. I used to always be really, I wanted to become a saint someday. And then later on, like in my adolescent years, I thought about being a priest. Um, that all fell by the wayside as I became older. Um, so no, I did not have access to my intuition really. I mean, I always feel like I've been guided, and now when I look back in hindsight, I know that I've been guided my entire path. I mean, the stories are horrendous and exciting, but also scary.
Yeah.
Uh, my therapist teacher told me one time, "You're lucky to be alive." Uh, and so, but later on, as I started on my path, um, I began to heal and started becoming more open to my own abilities in connecting with spirit and with the universe.
Yes.
And I am much more of a participant. No, I'm not just guided now. but I expect to have my path unfold before me in all areas of my life. And if I have some resistance to one particular thing, like in money or something, whatever it is, it raises a red flag for me that, well, why not? Why should your life not be the way it always has been? I mean, back when I was younger, I mean, I was just kind of being led along, and I'm very happy to say I believe that I took most of the positive paths. I took a lot of detours, certainly, but I arrived here. So
Yeah.
I'm here right now in this moment. That's where I'm living. And I stay in gratitude all the time, as much as possible. It's like a very powerful resource for me.
Yes, I speak a lot on that, because it's an extremely powerful source. I like that you said that. I think that's what you just said right now, or like a resource. And so you'd mentioned already that people sometimes are like, how are you still alive, much less in this like state of grace? So what are some of the things that you've had to face in your life?
Well, going back to, just sticking with the gratitude a little bit, the most valuable thing that I've learned came from, I was in a 22-year marriage. We were both very successful in our business. We had a business together. We were in television, media, electronic media production. We had a lot of equipment. We had 4 studios. We had 7 employees. We were making zillions of dollars, and I was totally consumed and at the opposite end of the thriving continuum. Totally empty, miserable. I used to lay in bed at night next to my wife, just in total misery, not necessarily because of just her, but the way that my soul felt. I mean, I just was sick. And the only way that I could start breaking out of this, first of all, I started going to therapy, which was a miracle in itself. But I started getting up earlier than anybody else, because I was a servant, and I would wake up in the morning, and the first thing I would do would be to serve her coffee.
Oh.
And the only way that I could get any alone time was to get up before she did. So I would wake up early in the morning and ride my bicycle. And what I learned on that bicycle ride was that you can always find something to be grateful for. For me, the only thing on many mornings was the air blowing in my face. And it became a ritual for me every morning on my bicycle to pray and thank God for the air I felt blowing into my face.
Oh my gosh, that's
all I needed. That
beautiful.
Opened my fountain of gratitude turned into joy, and I've learned to always be able to do that. So it doesn't matter where we are and how bad things are, we can always find anything. If we can just get our fountain primed, then it will flow and take over.
It's true. And once you get that fountain flowing in the manner that you're talking about, you mentioned the word joy, and it's all stemming from this ability to have gratitude for the simplest of things, to recognize even in a gloomy day and a crappy day, there's still beauty to be found in it in some capacity. So yeah, I love that you say that you were just simply grateful for the air blowing on your face. So as you went on this, you were going on these bike rides, and at what point was it you or her that decided to end the marriage? And did your therapy start before that happened for your own personal self?
Yeah, I started in the very late 1990s. I met my therapist in a very serendipitous occurrence. Actually, it was amazing, because I had missed a plane on a Colorado ski trip. And when my family and I got to the airport, we had to take separate planes. And when I got back to Houston, where I lived at the time, my daughter picked me up at one airport and had to take me to the other airport to pick up my car. And while I was driving home, I was listening to this radio show where this therapist was talking about intimacy. And I said, man, that's what I need to do. My marriage needs intimacy. So I'm going to call this lady up. And I called her the next day and I said, I want to learn to be intimate. And she said, okay, I'll book you and you can come in and learn. And at my first therapy appointment, she taught me that before I could become intimate with my wife or anybody else, I needed to become intimate with myself.
Mm-hmm. That is so true.
That is where my journey began.
Wow.
So that was in the late 1990s, probably 98, 99. I can't remember exactly. It may have been 96, but
Okay.
I don't remember.
Okay.
But I started weekly therapy. I mean, I'll talk about my sexual abuse experience, which came out the first meeting with my therapist. It was like my knowledge, my memories of sexual abuse had been buried for 40 something years. I don't know how long, but it had been, since I was a little boy, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But the progression of my marriage was I go to therapy and I'm becoming more self-aware. I'm learning about Jungian psychology. I'm reading a lot. When I learned about Jungian psychology, it was like my mind and my soul could dance together for the very first time. And I started feeling more harmony in my life. I started becoming a better person. And it just drove my wife crazy.
That's what happened. That's what happened with me.
Well, what happens with us when we're in these unconscious relationships, we are projecting our own stuff onto our partner.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as they're vulnerable enough to take it on, then we can live in this homeostasis that we're used to, which is to see ourselves through our partners until they're unable to carry the load. And that's when things start getting upset.
Yes.
When they don't act the way that we want them to act, when they don't measure up to those standards that we've set while we're projecting our stuff on them. So I started changing. And as I changed, things became more uncomfortable for her. She started trying to go to therapy. We went to couples therapy. There just was not buy-in. It was not working very well.
Yeah.
We were in such fear of changing things. We had this huge infrastructure. Our business was, we stayed in debt all the time. But on the other hand, we were making enough money to pay the debt off. But it was just a cycle. We were driving BMWs. We were living in the nicest part of town. We were putting our kids through college. We were just busy all the time. I used to have to work all night long and then run to Federal Express every day to take commercials. And I was always, zooming my car down the freeway to get there. So all this pressure. And we were locked into that. We would go home at night and drink a bottle of wine and watch TV and then be exhausted and go to sleep and start over the next day. And we were just in this cycle. And that's why I
call it the rinse and repeat. Well, just talking about it, I can feel like the inside of my body. It's like, oh, you don't want to feel that, Oh my gosh.
And you're medicating yourself by the things you consume, by we thought nothing of going to expensive restaurants or driving into our neighborhood, in our expensive cars to our nice home and going to the furniture store and just buying the most beautiful plush furniture, all this stuff. And then we'd have to go and grind at the office and talk about the pressure of buying expensive equipment. And then the creativity, having to be creative all the time. I mean, it was a rat race. Yeah. And a lot of times in our society, our creativity is in service to something, particularly money. It's creativity for the sake of the society. And what we end up doing is we end up getting a lot of the same thing out of people. We don't access their natural gifts. And so our world suffers. There's no diversity. It's all the same. All the commercials on TV look the same. All the effects are the same. I mean, they're more glitzy than the other ones are, but everything looks the same. I mean, it's just and we're mesmerized by it.
We are. We're like, I swear that we're like these zombies. When everybody is just looking the same, doing the same, trying to live the same life, going after the same aspirations, now it just look like a bunch of robots.
I have a story about robots. I was going to the top of the tallest building in Houston one time to do a TV show. And when I got in the elevator, it was an oil company. And when I got in the elevator, all these employees piled into the elevator with me. And I remember how gray their skin looked. And it was almost like being in a movie as I went up to the top of this building in this elevator. It was like the blood had been sucked out of these people.
Oh, God, it's true. That's why if you think about what do zombies look like usually in movies, they usually look gray and like drab.
Well, I truly believe that we don't have to be stuck. We don't have to be in this zombie-like existence. And actually, we have been primed through our education and through the available jobs and things like that, and the career tracks and all this kind of stuff. We've been limited very much to serve a society. And I think the biggest service one can do for themselves is to break out.
Oh my God, that's your hashtag, Tom. Freaking break out. Serious.
And that's why I started riding my bike. That's why I started riding my bike at 5:30 in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. It was the only time I could break out. But breaking out changed my life. I look at it like we're living on an oil slick that is on the surface of the ocean. Mm-hmm. And it's so thin. It's just like an oil slick. And that's where our existence is in this oil slick. But there is a deep ocean and there is a endless sky that we can live in. But we have to break out. And it takes work. And that's what my business is about. That's what my practice is about, is helping people break out, find their joy through gratitude, through, working on dreams, whatever, I do a lot of different things, art, dance, many different things, but help people break out and start to find this path and build this new life again,
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, you really, like you said, it's a lot of work. It doesn't always look pretty. It can be pretty uncomfortable and painful, and to be able to be a guide for those individuals that are going through the transition and transformation and this whole healing process, to have a good support system around you at that time is really important. So what was the sex trauma then that you ended up facing that you really didn't discover till I think you said you were 40?
Well, this was childhood. I was a little boy. My family was in the military, and we were living in Germany. We were living in Germany at the time, and I was just a kid in the neighborhood, the oldest child. I think probably there were 4 of us at that point. Ultimately, there were 6 of us. But I was wandering the neighborhood, and this guy that I remember as being either late high school, early college, started making friends with me. And, I had a crew cut, probably a little tiny bike that the wheels were probably, 18 inches, they were very small, maybe 12 inches round,
Mm-hmm.
Just tiny little guy, probably had those tassels on the bike, and, going down to the playground. We lived in this big military complex with, these huge apartment buildings, probably 3 stories, 4 stories high, maybe even more than that. And just bays and bays and bays of apartments, And anyway, so I remember this older kid befriending me. I don't know how long that process took, but he eventually invited me down to the basement of one of the buildings. And I remember that our apartments were located up in the building, but on the bottom in the basement, there were storerooms, and every apartment had a storeroom. My family had a storeroom, and there was this long, dark hallway that would connect the whole building, I mean, from one end of the building to the other. It was probably, oh gosh, probably 100 yards long or something. I mean, it was very long, but it was this long, dark tunnel, and it connected all these storerooms. And so he invited me down to his storeroom, and eventually started getting sexual with me. And I was a little guy, sometime between 4 and 6 years old. Yeah, I tend to think it was younger because I was home and there weren't very many kids around. So it seems like, maybe I was in kindergarten and going half day or something like that. And and I wanted to be accepted. He was a kid, an older kid. What little kid doesn't like to be accepted by older kids? And I just remember, nothing violent happened to me, but it was certainly inappropriate.
Yes, absolutely.
The things that he was doing with me, and it was secretive and hidden. And he would, take my pants down and, do things with me, and, try to get me to do things with him. And I felt very uncomfortable about all of it, but there was this need for acceptance that was very strong. And so I definitely, agreed to be with him.
Yeah. And that's really normal too. I kind of appreciate that you kind of brought that up, because it's like, even though this isn't right, it's like you're still going, like, agreeing to meet them and saying yes. Like, after a while, we just start to say yes. And then we're saying yes, but then there's this like weird feeling behind it. And then, like you say, there's this shame just automatically at that age. We're not always like connecting the dots to all the psychological things that are going on in those moments, like the imprints that we're getting on the subconscious level. But all of the shame starts to get imprinted pretty young. And then also too, at that time, you were his servant. It's kind of like, how I don't know if you and I talked about the inferior superior whole thing. On another time, you and I need to have coffee and talk about that. But this whole like object subject, and that happened to me. Like, I didn't even know about the whole fawn thing, and because I froze, but that whole taking on another person's desires, and then taking on this idea that it is our responsibility and our duty to serve others, no matter what that looks like. And so then, to some degree, we end up kind of playing it out later. And then on top of that, Tom, it was like, when you described that, the location, it in itself also kind of has, like you say, this almost scary, eerie, sinister kind of secretive visual, you know? And then if it was cold and dark, and what was, I don't know why I want to know, what was the material of the wall? Because
The walls were either, I mean, it was very concrete.
That's what I feel. Oh my God. Because I was going to say, I should have just said it.
Like, it was almost like old jail cells,
Yes, that's exactly.
Bolts on them, and there was, well, I've got, one thing I do want to say I'm remembering right now is that this little boy, me, I had one of those Indian belts with beads.
Oh yeah, I know exactly which kind you're talking about.
And I remember him unbuckling that belt. I have always wanted to find one of those belts. I want one of those belts, and you can't find them anywhere, but it's like this little boy's belt with these Indian beads, and I loved it. But I remember that, and I had cowboy boots, and I remember those. And this room, I mean, it was like I think there may have been like pallets in it, and it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't a comfortable place. It was not a comfortable place to be at all. It was very stark and hard. And I remember we used to get down on the ground, and it was not like a nurturing place or anything like that. It was very, it was not good.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, so this happened, I can't remember how many times it happened, but it happened several times. And again, I have to say that I'm really lucky that this person was not like a violent
Yes.
person. There's no comfort in thinking about this, but it could have been worse, certainly worse. But the end of it was that his mother came down and banged on the door, and he made me be really quiet while he talked to her, and he talked to her enough to satisfy her to go away, and then he told me to get out and never come back. And so I was pulling myself together and running down this dark hallway towards my area, because he lived on the other end from me. And I was going down the hallway, not being able to see anything but the light at the end. And it was way down there, and it looked like a pinpoint.
Oh my gosh.
And I was running down this hallway scared to death because this woman had banged on the door, and I was afraid we were going to get caught. And I was so worried. And God, I think that while I was running down that hall, the memories were just repressed. And I never thought about it again until my first therapy appointment. But it completely messed up my whole concept of relationships.
Yep. I mean,
Sexual, there was always a sexual component of everything.
Yep.
It was frozen in me.
Oh my God. I love that you said it in that way, because it is. It's like frozen in time. You know, it's like this iceberg on the inside that literally needs to be chipped away or melted and, you know, and dissolved and like get to the center. It's like the center of a Tootsie Pop. It's like, what is at the core of how I'm showing up and how I'm perceiving and what I'm attracting? Like, where is this all really coming from? And when you get to the seed of it, but you know, that first therapy session was your first realization, right? How did it all sort of come to you at once? Was it starting to unravel little by little as you were going through each therapy session? What did that look like?
No, this was instantaneous. It was almost like, and I'm thinking about it right now, it was almost like this guy or this thing or this event had been standing in the room with me for my entire life, but standing very still.
Shit.
And when I went to therapy, he said, "I'm here."
Wow.
And I don't remember exactly what the sequence was, but when I walked out of that therapy session, it was so profound that I knew I had to keep going. And I went for 10 years at least, every week, except I took a few breaks, but I went.
You were committed.
When something like that happens, I mean, it's like I couldn't ignore it. It was like amazing.
You know, and it's always interesting because some people, once they get that first initial revelation or that awareness, they just want to be like a little rabbit and just run, like, let's just get through this. Let's do this. Let's face this. Let's uncover this. Let's heal this, right? Like, whatever. Let's befriend this. And other people just want to turn a blind eye to it. And so, you know, everybody has their own timing, I guess, when they're ready to kind of see things for what they really are.
I'm sure that's true. I give my therapist a lot of credit. I mean, she is amazing. I mean, but I've had a lot of teachers, and a lot of the teachers I've had have been the women that I've been in relationship with. And not all of those have been like sexual relationships or dating relationships or romantic relationships. Some of the relationships that I've had with women have been women that have said, no, I have boundaries. I'll be your friend, but this is the way it's going to be. And I would, instead of, you know, rejecting that and just taking it personally and saying, oh, okay, well, I'm not wanted here. I saw it differently. I saw it as, hey, I can handle that. And it's great to have female friends that are not, you know, romantic or sexual or or whatever. I mean, it completely changed things for me, and it's been a long process. I think I probably will never learn it all. I'm always continuing to learn, you know. I mean, I don't think we ever get there, and I don't know what we would do if we did. I think that knowing that we can always experience new things and reach new levels and see things differently and grow and become happier and impact the world in better ways, I think that is an exciting journey to be on.
Yes, for sure. You know, we are these beautiful, multifaceted, complex beings. And the story of you is beyond that you could even wrap your mind around, that you literally can spend lifetimes getting to know you, to have that open attitude and perception of knowing that each day is a new day and that you can discover new things and see things in a new way all the time makes the entire experience more delicious.
Yeah.
What you're doing, what you're choosing to do, and how you're choosing to use your life is to be a service to others. And like you said earlier, you really did want to be a saint. That you wanted to be a saint, or that you wanted potentially to be like just a religious kind of guide for individuals, or somebody that others can look up to. That's pretty much what a saint is, like Mother Teresa. She's beautiful. You know what I mean? Like there's some people that are saints that maybe aren't given that title, but that are certainly acting as saints on this planet right now. And I definitely think that you're one of them.
It's a great life to have, I can tell you. I'm really enjoying it, and every day is new and fresh, and it never gets boring, and it changes continuously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have recently discovered the I Ching, which is the Chinese Book of Change, which is about 3,000 years old, and I've been using it to kind of inform me of my life. Just to add a little extra flavor to things, a different perspective. It's been very cool, and I've enjoyed it a lot. And just, you know, life brings new things all the time, new people.
It's magical. It's magical. And you know, this is you and and Tom and I talked about this a little bit already. You know, there's a lot of men that have been impacted by sex trauma, and they have a more difficult time kind of coming out and talking about this sort of thing. So, you know, I'm looking forward to having more men in the future, you know, share their story on here and really open up the sacral circle to men and women who are all dealing with this. And how can we be of service to one another to inspire to walk the path of healing? And as I was talking about the men that have all faced this type of trauma, I definitely feel in my heart that Tom and I here in San Antonio at some point will be doing some work together to try to bring healing to the men who are needing it. And I think it's really important for a man's voice, especially a man who's dealt with this type of trauma, to be the one leading this space that we're going to create together. So I really am looking forward to doing that work with you.
I'm probably getting to the point where in my healing, where I am ready to share with people that are in healing some very intimate details about what was happening to me as a child, as a young as an older child, as an adolescent, and throughout the different stages of my development. This abuse had a big impact on my fantasy life, on the way that it wanted to be served. And I think the reason why I'm able now to share it, number one, I've healed a lot from the sexual trauma, is that I don't want to have any secrets in my psyche that will infect my psyche. So by sharing these things, not to sensationalize them or anything else, because there's some pretty dark things that it was asking of me, some pretty dark things, pretty disturbing for me. I just don't want to keep that stuff alive inside of me, you know? So I think I feel very safe in sharing those things. I think that it would be in service to others because it would invite them to also unload those things from their psyche, so that we can move forward in a very pure, clean, healthy way.
Yeah, definitely. It's about bringing the sacredness back to our sexuality. But before we can restore that, we need to see the darker side and the shadow side of sex, um, and understand it better. And like you said, sort of bring it to the surface. And when one person does that, it gives permission for another person to do that. And then another person does it, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast, so that we could kind of just have one more platform on this planet right now where we can do that, safely, lovingly, again, with no judgment. My whole thing is where we leave judgment at the door, because that's really the only way we're going to be able to heal, is if we can take the shame out of this whole thing, and what's happened to us. We'll have less suffering and more people thriving, which is what you help people do. So please, thank you again so much. You're officially a part of normally I say the Sacral Circle Sisterhood, but now I can include the brotherhood / sisterhood. And please let people know how they can connect with you, or anything else that you would like to share or leave people with, before we wrap up this beautiful episode. Give people information on how they can connect with you.
Well, I'm on Psychology Today, which is a website that people can find therapists through. I also have a website called Therapy San Antonio, and it's www.therapysanantonio, and that's a website. And then I'm on Facebook as Tom Tompkins LCSW. And if you would like to meet with me, I'm still seeing clients. I see them in my house in the Monte Vista area of San Antonio. And I'm also, for people that are in the state of Texas, doing some, online telephone calls, sessions too. So I wish you the best, and I know that all of us can find healing and fullness of life. All of us can.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to thank our beautiful listeners for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the Sacred Stories podcast on iTunes, where you'll find other impactful, inspiring shows. Connect with us via our social media pages. You'll find us at the Sacral Circle. Your shares and likes are greatly appreciated because they help spread the love. If you have any questions about my coaching and healing services, please visit my website at JanieTerrazas.com. As we say goodbye, always remember to know your worth and continue to love and value yourself wholeheartedly. Peace be with you.